Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And we are here in the restoration studio, and we are going to meet two very special people who are going to show you around the studio. So let me just flick. And this is Ella.
Hi.
This is Eric.
Hi there.
And this is the first time the studio has been used. It's the first week, it's newly opened. And I'm just going to flick the camera around, guys. Hey everybody, how exciting? Yes, exciting indeed. This is an amazing place, guys. This is a very, very rare opportunity to see inside here. In fact, I'm probably the first non-employee to ever see in here. I am, indeed. Excellent. Very good, guys. Okay, I'm going to hand you over to Ella first. And maybe you would like to explain a little about what you do and why you do it.
So I'm a paintings conservator, so that means that I look after the paintings that you see on the wall hanging. I've got an example here to show you something you wouldn't usually see when you're just walking around looking at pictures on the wall. Start with this out of the frame. You can see it's really a three-dimensional object, particularly because it's a Gogh, because he used that lovely textured way of applying paint. This is a spring landscape that he painted in 1888, a flowering orchard, and I'm showing you halfway through the restoration, which is what we call the stripped state, because what you see is actually the real condition of the painting. So all previous restorations have been removed, previous additions that don't belong to the painting. So you're just looking at the raw state of the painting, Van Gogh's own paint, but also together with damages such as this tear in the cloud, which we still have to fill and retouch so that you won't see it when it's hanging on the wall. The picture has been here for some months, and we're working with it under the microscope, literally centimetre by centimetre. And what we did as a first step is to remove the varnish layer, because Van Gogh didn't actually want to have his paintings varnished. If you think of a stone that you find on the beach, a pebble, you think how it looks different when it's wet. That when you put a varnish on a painting, it has the same effect. The colours become much more vivid, and the surface is much more saturated. But Van Gogh wanted a matte, primitive surface, like contemporary artists at that time. And it wasn't until 1931 that the then conservator applied a varnish to the painting. That was quite a usual thing to do at that time. And in fact, most of the work that we do now is undoing the work of previous conservators. So the problem is that varnish that turns yellow over time and very brown. And so you couldn't really see the original black colours of the painting anymore. You can still see this tiny areas that are slightly shiny. What we do is actually working under the microscope. We make our own cotton wool swabs. So we use a cocktail stick, wind cotton wool on it to the exact size that you want, and sometimes loose, sometimes very tight. We do many tests with different solvents or gels, same sort of substance as a gel that you use in your hair, for example. There are many different choices that we can use to make the varnish swell, and then we remove it using this swab, which we roll very carefully across the surface under the microscope. Then there are always little residues left, and at the last stage we decide how far to go, because there's a certain limit as to what you can safely achieve. And when this is hanging on the wall, you won't notice that in any case. Just to show you briefly the back of the painting. It's not something you'd see in the galleries. It would be very disrespectful to turn the painting upside down and show you the back. This is not the original reverse of the canvas. What we see here, I think you can see it's very dark. I hope you can see it. Mm-hmm. And it's slightly shiny, sort of glossy, flat surface. So what has happened to the painting, again in 1931, is that the conservator applied a second canvas to the back, melted wax resin onto the back of the painting and ironed face down to achieve this bond between the two canvases. Now that's not something we do now, as you can imagine. You can see that the paint surface is not flat, so it would be protected with a paper that was stuck on. The painting would be turned face down and then ironed from the back, so basically you couldn't see what you were doing. And all things considered, I think he did a very skilled job. But it's not something we do now because this wax resin that's used to stick the canvas comes right through to the front of the painting in certain areas, and it becomes quite brown in time. So again, it causes colour change. When you look very close, you can see, once you see it, you see them all over the place, these tiny brown dots. These are the bare nubs of the canvas where the wax resin has seeped in and caused the threads to darken. You can see it all around the contours of the trees, for example, which has been deliberately left open by Van Gogh. But originally this would have had a light colour, and now it's turned very dark. So the question is, by the restoration, how far we go to dotting these little spots of lost colour to reverse the modelling again, to get this back to light as opposed to dark. And that's where it can be very useful to work together with colour scientists, for example, because they, as Eric can tell you much better, they can predict mixtures of pigments that will enable me to achieve an exact match to this colour, this light colour, which is applied onto the canvas. So they can make for me a pot of paint with exactly the right colour that I can use to dot in these millions of missing dots of paint, should I decide to do that.
Yeah, well, so indeed, as Ella just explained, parts of these paintings change color because some of the pigments, they fade, for example, in daylight. And well, Ella works very hard on, for example, removing varnish, etc., and looking at the painting. But what she cannot do, or what nobody would allow even Ella to do, is to really change the pigments and make it in the fresh version of the pigments. So the project that we both work on now is in trying to digitally restore paintings like this one. And that's indeed where I became involved. So as a color scientist, I work for Axel Nobel, a paint company, and we have well, a lot of experience in color and how to formulate color. So how can you mix pigments to get a certain color? Maybe just as an illustration, you can have a look here. Here you see a model of the Fiat Punto. It has a certain color. Now, if you really look, what is the color of this car? If you look at Fiat Puntos on the streets, they have these different colors that you see here. It's more or less the same color, but not exactly. So if in a car repair shop you want to have your car repaired, then we as paint company really should make a difference between this shade of green and that one. So we have different color formulas for this, different recipes for mixing colors. So we have databases with really typically 50,000 different car colors for a particular paint. So we have a lot of expertise and software how to make these colors. Now the funny thing is, if you now look back again to that painting, and you see we have this painting. There have been measurements on the exact color of this painting as an image. So then you have, well, say a few megabytes of pixels, and for each pixel we know the color. And what we do now is that we calculate exactly what are the concentrations of the pigments that Van Gogh used in this painting. And for each pixel we will then calculate what is the the recipe. If we know that, then also we can say, well, for each of those pigments we will try to find out with our team how the colors change for each pigment, and then we can also restore digitally how the painting looked like when Van Gogh had just painted it.
It's a very good example. In this painting, for example, this red colour, which we know is Geranium Lake, and Van Gogh wrote about it in his letters. He knew that it was very light sensitive and that it would quickly fade, but he thought by applying it thickly that the colour would last longer, and it has where he's applied it thickly, but where it's been mixed with white, for example in the flowers, well, you can see the pink colour's gone, they're just white now. So this picture too has been quite affected by colour change, although the vivid green, which is a very toxic green. It was actually known as poisonous green in the 19th century. It contains arsenic, still has a very bright, beautiful colour next to the purple. But putting together all these observations on the painting, we can see that the surface of this yellow, for example, this is lead chromate. That's a pigment that was also known, it was quite notorious to darken under the influence of light. It has a brownish surface, also due to darkening under the influence of light. So we can put all this information together and gain an idea of how the painting has changed, work together with curators, scientists. Eric is kind of the key figure for the mathematical part, which, in fact, I think you're the only one that does in Holland. So, and putting all these different aspects together, we hope to get very close, a much better idea of what Van Gogh actually intended. But of course, in conservation ethics, I mean, in the past it was different. You could say, well, we know that underneath the surface of the paint, the colour's still there, so you could scrape off the surface. It's just a few micrometers. Of course, we don't do that because you're removing original paint. You could say, well, we know approximately what the original colours were, so I could apply my paint on top of Van Gogh's paint to restore the more vivid pink, for example. But we don't quite know exactly what the original pink was, so it would be a little bit of a falsification. And so these are, in terms of ethical questions, it sounds a bit heavy, but conservation, it's very important that we follow certain guidelines, and one of those guidelines is that I would not cover up Van Gogh's own paint with my paint, because he was a much better artist. And so this idea of wanting to show the public something that's authentic is a very important part of conservation. So it means that the newly developed techniques of doing this digitally opens up a whole new world without actually having to do anything with the objects themselves. So that's a really fantastic development.
Yeah.
And it sort of makes us rethink the whole idea of Van Gogh and the colours that he used, and people think of his signature colours as blue and yellow, but more and more we're confronted with the fact that in fact instead of blue he used purple, so probably we should be thinking in terms of purple and yellow, which would make much more sense in fact.
That's amazing. Some people were asking how many pieces you have restored from the museum.
From the museum. Perhaps I should first say how long it takes to restore one painting, because that will give you, because if I say how many, it's not going to sound very much.
Yeah.
But a painting like this, for example, you would be working at least 6 months, because you're working centimetre by centimetre under the microscope. You can imagine, I wish I could show you that, working through the microscope, but it's like a whole moon landscape when you look at it on the magnification. We work at up to 60 times magnification. So it's very painstaking, and you can't make mistakes, so you have to take the time to do it well. You get one chance. So if I added up, it depends of course what you're doing to a painting. Some treatments are quite quick, but these are really satisfying, the ones that take a long time to do.
I think that's the funny thing was also with the previous painting that we looked at, then you were halfway, say, with the varnish removal. And at that moment we started to do the calculations also about how would the painting look like if all the varnish was removed. So we did it digitally, we made a prediction of that, and then we had to wait actually for you to really do it.
Yeah,
of
it
course,
took a long time, huh?
Yes, it took a long time. Yes,
yeah.
It's really indeed takes a lot of effort, of course, to do that millimeter by millimeter. Really.
Yeah, but it was a good test because we achieved the same result.
Yeah.
I mean, I did with the actual painting. And
yes.
You got the right result with the digital image, so you predicted exactly the right result.
Wow,
so,
excellent. Yeah. Maybe we could try and take a look through the microscope. Do you think?
Let's
I think we're going to try this, guys. Do some restoration right now for us to see. Somebody asked. I think that might be a bit of a big ask.
I'm not actually good doing a restoration, but I can show you.
We're going to have a look through the microscope, guys.
Here, you see here the varnish is removed, but when you look with the microscope, you'll see little remains of shiny varnish. You will not see with the naked eye.
This is an experiment, guys, and it's a testament to my shaky hands.
It's not bad.
Yeah, the light is quite bright on it. So this is what you get to see every time you work on these paintings. Possibly,
Would that help?
I think the light might be a little bit bright.
Would that help? Take it off a bit?
Yeah, I think so. Oh,
Let's do that.
sorry guys.
Sometimes that happens with these high-tech. Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Yeah, you can see the brown around that little fine streak of paint. You can see the residues of the varnish.
Wow. That's a treat, I think. Absolutely.
It's nice. Wish you could show more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we won't be showing any restoration, guys, but that's about as close to the restoration as we will see. It's probably the closest anybody here has been to a Van Gogh painting. Yeah, it is amazing work that you do here. You probably know Van Gogh's paintings as good as, if not better, than himself.
Well, it's a strange process because when you work for 6 months on a painting, literally centimetre, and then you feel like it belongs to you in a way at the end of it because you know every square millimetre, literally. But then at the same time, you're actually quite relieved to give it back to the gallery and that other people can enjoy looking at it because it's quite intense. But you do develop a certain connection with the painting. That's true.
Excellent. Yeah. Brilliant. Maybe you'd like to talk a bit about the studio.
I can tell you some things. Behind you, where you can see the easels lined up, you can see the plannings do a lot of work. The wall is actually facing onto the gallery, so you can hear the visitors on the other side. This was originally a transparent wall, but that would mean that the visitors could see our lamps, for example, which would be quite disturbing for them looking at the paintings. We have a very high-tech interior, so to maximise the working space, we have this long column in the middle. These are very futuristic suction apparatus because we work with solvents, for example, and other substances, toxic substances, so we have to be very careful the way we work. We have daylight lamps. It's very important. You know that effect when you get up in the morning, you put 2 socks on, you think they're both black, you get to work, one's blue and one's black. So we don't want to have the effect when we touch the painting in one light and it hangs in the gallery with a different light, for example, that the colours will change. So the colours are very important, the lamps are very important. We have a nice view outside, but it's quite dark at the moment.
It is quite dark, actually, yes.
You can see that. And we have a solvent extraction unit. You can see we're still in the process of unpacking. So it's really the very first day that we're working here. And everything is neatly worked away in cupboards, so it looks very tidy at the moment. I'm sure that won't last long.
No, it's always the way, but it is a beautiful studio. It's a beautiful space to work. And I think I asked you this yesterday or the day before. The lights, all the windows they're specially treated, so no UV light.
That's right. Yeah. We have to do. This space was already there, so this is actually light from the west. Sorry. We would prefer to have northern light, but that wasn't possible because we just had to make do with the space in the building. But these windows are all treated. It's actually quite a lot of light. It was surprising. It's enough in the daytime. You don't really need extra lamps to work at the moment. And it's a very kind of, you can hear it's very quiet too. So it's a very sort of peaceful setting in terms of light and sound. And we feel that we can really concentrate and focus here much better than we could in our previous spot, even though now and again we hear visitors in the gallery crying and children.
I was actually wondering that too. It was a silly thought I had. I was wondering, do you actually listen to music as you're restoring?
Some people do, but we don't. Then they would have a
headphone.
telephone. Yeah,
yes.
So because our tastes vary somewhat, so some people like classical music. A lot of conservatives like to work because it's very soothing.
Yes.
It helps to relax. But there are other conservatives that have a different taste, and then so they would put their own music on, perhaps. But I don't need the music. I just totally focus.
You focus on the painting itself. I don't know if did we actually introduce the name of this painting? I can't remember.
You're probably right. I don't think we did. It's Flowering Orchard, and it was painted in Arles, so it's just out the city limits. And in the same week, he painted another view which is actually hanging in the museum at the moment. Very similar colours with this bright green and the purples, and he describes in the letter that it's after a rainfall, so you get this very vivid contrast of the two colours, which is what inspired him to paint it. And you can see it's quite cloudy, so it looks as if it might have rained recently. And I think originally it looked even more cloudy, some of the pinks in the sky faded.
I think somebody asked, when did you start restoring this? This is your latest piece, is it?
I have to say, it was started quite some time ago, that's more than a year ago, but because we didn't have a studio for some months, so it was, yeah, we had to stop the treatment, and now there's a very tight deadline because this is going to an exhibition, so a colleague has been focused on it for the past 6 weeks to really get it to a stage that it can go and travel. So, but altogether I would say it's an 8-month treatment, which is quite normal for this type of painting.
Yeah.
The other one you filled with irises, that took, I think, 1.5 years or something?
That took even longer. Yeah, that had to do with, because it's even more impasto.
Yes.
So even more of this kind of thick, curly paint, and you had to get in at every angle to really pick out the residues of varnish and of painting. But also because some of the colours could be quite sensitive, so you need to do log testing and find the right way to treat each colour area. So it's not like one recipe that works for the whole painting,
yeah.
as you know.
Yes.
So it's very much, yeah, a really sort of step-by-step process. And there were some residues of the previous restorer who treated the painting in 1927. That was a very unexpected find that in the sky area, which was not documented, that he had to retouch the sky to improve upon Van Gogh's own paint. Because Van Gogh had gone back and reworked the sky area in a very rough and ready manner. And apparently he found that disturbing, so he neatened it up a bit with his own retouching paint. And he hadn't documented it, so that was quite a discovery. It was unexpected to find that. And most of it has been taken off. I didn't take everything off because I think it's also quite interesting as a document of what the approach to conservation in 1931. So it's a sort of historical document in itself. So, but you don't see it as a disturbing element anymore. And I didn't retouch because I'm not going to improve upon Van Gogh's painting. No. We wouldn't do that anymore. But it's a nice example of how attitudes change even from 1931 to now, which I suppose it's quite a long time ago, but it doesn't seem that long ago.
Yeah.
And who knows when somebody in 100 years' time restores the painting again, maybe they'll have a completely different approach than the techniques I'm using now.
Yeah.
New techniques using laser, for example, rather than solvents, so all types of new possibilities.
Because that's also where all these paintings are changing color over time. So yeah, they will all become more fading away, so to say, many of these colors.
But that's the big dilemma, because you want to show paintings, so you need to exhibit them in light, but we know that the colours will continue to change as long as you expose them to light. But what visitors may notice, although we haven't really had a reaction from the public, is that because of all this research, we decided in the museum to lower our lighting guidelines. So, in fact, before the standard lighting level was 150 lux. That doesn't say so much, but now it's less than half that. So the lights have been brought down to less than half that level in the Munch Van Gogh exhibition. And at the same time, we've introduced new LED lamps as a general trend in museums with the right colour spectrum. And not had any complaints from the public, so apparently they could still see the paintings well. So it shows that it can be done, and we hope that all these measures together will help to preserve the colours for longer.
Yeah. Excellent.
And if the colours do fade altogether, then we'll always have the digital reconstruction.
Let's hope so, yes.
So out of all the pieces in the museum, and there are quite a number of pieces, they all eventually have to be restored, right?
I think every painting at some point will end up in the restoration studio, but maybe it's once in 100 years, and the difficult task is trying to decide which ones have priority. And there's a very clear priority for pictures, where, for example, the paint is flaking, that doesn't come up often, partly because it's all been wax lined, as I talked about earlier on with wax resin, so that's stuck the paint firmly on. So we make a distinction between conservation, which is doing things that preserve the life of the painting, make sure it's in stable condition, and this we would call restoration, so that's a further step, which is to make the painting presentable for the general public, so you can really appreciate much better what Van Gogh intended with the colours he used and so on. You could say that has less priority in terms of prolonging the life of the picture, but I think in terms of enjoying the paintings, it's a very important aspect.
Because somebody just asked if you revarnish the paintings.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. It's not a straightforward answer. We prefer not to revarnish because it was not Van Gogh's intention to varnish the painting, even though nowadays we have stable varnishes that won't change colour over time, they won't yellow.
He produced them as Sonneville indeed.
Yeah.
Yes. But it would change, of course, the appearance of the painting and not be as Van Gogh intended it to be. Yes.
Yeah, we have tricks, as I'm sure you're well aware, of using varnish with waxes, for example, which you can apply a varnish, but still you wouldn't necessarily see that it has been varnished. So.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why we might consider applying a varnish to this picture, for example, is if we decide to retouch all these tiny brown points that we were talking about before, then applying a varnish layer first over the picture would mean that my paint was on top of that varnish layer as an isolation layer, so all my paint could be easily removed in the future because it's lying on top of another layer. So there's a layer on top of Van Gogh's paint and then my paint on top of that. So that could be a consideration to apply a varnish layer in this case, but it's not something, we're hoping not to do it, we're not sure yet, we're still thinking about this. But the preference is not to varnish, but there can be all sorts of reasons why it's necessary to varnish, but then using a reversible material.
Yeah. I find it very interesting that Van Gogh indeed experimented there with his pigments. He very much liked these very red pigments that at that moment were very new, the lake type of pigments. That he used them, he really loved that color, although indeed, as you said, he knew that they would change color. So yeah, he was really experimenting with what he could do with it. Yeah, and in the end, we have this painting which does have changed color at some point.
Yeah, it's a funny concept because he realised it would change, and he took measures to compensate for that change. So he was kind of calculating that in his painting technique and the colours, the way he was using the colours, taking into account that they will become less vivid. But the question is whether he could have, whether he anticipated that the colours would change to this extent. And I tend to think that I don't think he did anticipate the full extent that the colours have changed and have altered over time.
I get a question. Somebody also asked do you use the same type of paints that Van Gogh would have used?
No, well I can give a short answer because a lot of the paints that Van Gogh used are toxic, as he bought ready-made tube paints. For example, this green, which was known in the 19th century as poison green, which is a copper acetate arsenite, so it contains arsenic. It gives beautiful vivid colour. It was actually used in wallpaper. And when there's damp in the room, for example, the arsenic would be released into the room, so it was a very unhealthy practice. But there are other less healthy pigments like the red lead, which contains lead, the chrome yellows, which are lead chromate, so they've got chrome and lead. It's very unhealthy. I don't think AkzoNobel makes any of these pigments.
No, I checked indeed. So from the painting that we worked on, from the 13 pigments that you had identified before with your team, there was only one that we still produce as a paint company.
Okay, which is
and it was the titanium dioxide, so it wasn't even Van Gogh itself, it was the restaurator who used it.
Okay, but you said,
And all the other ones are not cannot be used anymore in paint because they're really too toxic.
Bit of a strange question. Somebody asked, were there any notable mistakes you noticed while restoring any pieces?
Notable mistakes by a conservator or by the painter?
Ooh, I think they meant by the painter.
By the painter. Well, he was not so precise. That's actually always quite exciting. We always hope to find mistakes because sometimes looking with X-rays, for example, you can see that there's a different image underneath and that he's changed his mind in the process of painting, which he did a lot. So, although in general, I have to say he very carefully prepared the picture that he was going to make. For example, with this painting, he's made a very detailed sketch with charcoal and then just filled in the charcoal outlines with paint, literally. But sometimes he had change of thought as he went along, and yeah, you could call that a mistake, but I suppose it's a sort of artistic
license.
process. Yeah.
What about mistakes by restoration or restorers?
That's a very relative. I mean, you could say what was done to this picture in 1931. We definitely wouldn't do it now, but it was the normal. It was done with the best intention. So it was using the materials that were available at that time, such as the wax resinous and adhesive. I mean, these things develop, so probably in 100 years, maybe somebody will say over the techniques that I'm using that, you know, that's a mistake because it was not a good way to do it, but you have to use the technologies that you have, search for the best possibilities that you have, and you can't do any more than that. And it's very important to write down why you do things, not just what you use, but also why you choose to do certain things, that the next conservator will know at least the thinking behind them, and they know which materials they have to deal with.
Does it also mean that you're very restrictive in what you do in the painting? That sometimes you would like to, for example, remove more varnish, but you think, well, let's keep away from that a bit.
Yeah, this is a kind of practical limit to what you can achieve, particularly when working under I mean, if you're looking at things under magnification, everything looks 100 times worse than it is. So you have to keep in mind that the picture's going back on the wall. That's the irony, I think, of conservators in terms of being perfectionists, but actually our whole job is accepting imperfections of the painter, but also things that have been done to the picture in the past that you can't undo safely. So we have to accept that the picture no longer looks the way it is, the colours have changed. So it's a sort of double role that you have. So in some ways it's never satisfying. On the other hand, yeah, hopefully the result you have satisfaction with.
Yeah, it's the best you can do now.
It's the best you can do now. Yeah, it's the very best you can do. Yeah.
Well, I think we've got a lot of people that would like to say thank you.
Oh, that's really nice.
I'm going to flip the camera around here. You can see how the people are chatting away.
lots of hearts popping up there.
Lots of little hearts there, yeah.
Yeah.
And
I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
So it can be kind of tricky sometimes keeping up with the comments. If I miss comments, I generally miss lots of comments. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, we're sort of kind of speechless in a way because it's all very new technology, but it's lovely to think that so many people are sharing our first day in the studio, actually. So in this way, we hope it's been a nice visit.
I think it's amazing, and I think I'd like to thank you for everybody who is watching, for inviting us here and for showing the amazing work you do. I think I've mentioned this to you already, but you do absolutely have the coolest job ever.
What can I say? Yeah, I think it's probably true, but
it is
I
true.
think a lot of other people say that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think is that us? We might just finish on a close-up of the painting, guys. And we'd like to thank you all again so much for joining and watching and sharing. And a big thank you also to the Van Gogh Museum for inviting us here today. And thank you so much, guys. Don't forget you can always share on the replay. And okay, bye-bye.